right. Well, things a pastor's wife wishes you knew. I do want to introduce what everybody knows her. That Andee is a fellow pastor's wife, and not only is she a fellow pastor's wife, she's a friend, and she's someone that's close by, that we can, when the days work out, we can get together, our kids can get together, and just enjoy fellowship. It's a sweet time, and it's something that I think every pastor's wife needs, is another fellow pastor's wife that can understand the struggles that come. I do want to share the fact that the Bible does not specifically tell us the things that a pastor's wife needs to be. But the Bible does tell us very clearly what a lady's leader in the church needs to be. And so we really are on the same playing field. When push comes to shove, we really need to be careful about judging our pastor's wife. How many pastor's wives are there? 3, 4, 5. Okay. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to what we expect in our pastor's wife, especially a new pastor's wife coming into a church where you're still trying to understand and make peace with the fact that your other pastor's wife has left, because we're not all the same. And so I think sometimes our new pastor's wife comes in and you're expecting her to just pick up where your other pastor's wife left off, and we're all different. And so those are expectations that really need to be controlled in our own minds. And I wanted to try to clarify a proper way of thinking and proper expectations that we should have of our pastor's wife, and not just our pastor's wife, but other ladies in our church. So if we can not just think these ways about our pastor's wife, but about each other, I think we'll have a more cohesive and bonded relationship with our pastor's wives, and not so many, it's in the larger churches they were called cliques. I think all of us are part of a small church. So I don't really see a lot of cliques. I don't see any cliques in my church in general, but I know that there are tendencies, because there's ladies that we click with and ladies that we don't click with, and ladies that can say things that hurt you, and especially if they're saying something about your child or your children, and ladies that maybe think you're on a pedestal. And so there's a wide range of expectations that we need to kind of bring to an even point. So let's talk about a couple of passages in the Bible that tell us how our ministry as ladies should be in the church. So now we're on the same playing field. Let's go to Titus 2:3-5. And I'm going to start at verse 3. I could read more, but I want to target leaders in our church. And we as ladies in the church, I think are all old enough to serve and minister in our church, are going to be in this category. So the aged women, which is not the older women necessarily, it is the mature women. So the mature women, likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. So a reminder, this is not a selected verses for a pastor's wife. These are selected verses in our Bible that talk to us as women in the church. So let's break those down. So holiness is another word for being good or being unique. And holiness is becoming definitely more unique in our world today. We're definitely, even if we don't want to be, we're more unique than what's going on out there by the day, it seems. A person who is holiness, a lady who is holy, radiates God, is set apart from the things that are not in tune with the Word of God, which we're becoming more of a beacon now, or there's a chance for us to be a beacon now, because the world around us is becoming so corrupt and so twisted, and so set apart from us. Really, they're basically setting themselves apart from us. So a holy woman needs to stand her ground in that department, be disciplined and be focused, especially on the things of the Word of God. Another part of our list there is not false accusers, and this could include being a woman who lies. Don't be a woman who lies. Don't be a woman who is divisive and spreads gossip to other women in the church, or your own husbands. That could cause your husbands to feel like they need to protect you in some way, when what you're sharing is not true, or not real. And then being deceitful. We can definitely try to manipulate situations as women, and deceive to help the outcome be beneficial to us, and we need to not be like that. The third part in the list is not get into wine, and I think most of us in this room don't really need me to go into detail about that, but it also, talking about drinking it, but also talking about being in the vicinity of wine, and so not going into a place that sells wine. Now, of course, at grocery stores there's nothing we can do about that, but the aisle is one place that we can avoid. It can go to the point of attending parties that distribute alcohol. When I was working in the secular environment, I did not go to the Christmas parties because there was alcohol involved. So you have to make those decisions, and you have to be discerning in each different situation. I know when it comes to family, it can be a little tricky, but you have to ask the Lord to help you in those specific situations. Number 4, teachers of good. So these are not only being teachers of the Bible and teachers of good things in front of a group, but also teachers of your own testimony. So what is your testimony teaching others? I think as parents, we can really get a better perspective of this than when we were not parents, because we start to notice our children copying us. So are our children going to be copying us and showing God's love because they're copying us, or are they going to be copying us and being ungodly because they're copying us? And so I think that definitely fits into that category of being teachers of good. We need to have a good example to other, to children, our children, to other children, and to other ladies in general. And then teachers to younger women. So most of us, I think, have been in the ministry, have been serving in church. I don't know all of you, but I'm assuming that most of you have been in church for a while and are serving in your local church and have been doing it for a little while. I know that there are places for everyone to serve, even teenagers. So there's potential that you guys are very familiar with ministry. So in your ministry, you're always going to be teaching someone younger than you. Okay, so even if you're a teenager, there are none here, but I'm just for the sake of example, they are teaching the younger people. I remember being in elementary school and just looking up to those teenagers and wanting to do whatever they did. So there's always someone younger than you that you are being an example to, and you may not even realize it. I tell my children all the time, you can't be this way because your little sister is watching, or they could be in a Sunday school class, and I say you need to be an example to the little ones in this class. So I'm trying to teach them from a young age that you need to always be very acute to their testimony in front of others. So teachers of young women, self-control, loving or committing to your husbands, Loving your children, and this is kind of one that I had to stop at, because as moms, why does the Lord have to put loving your children in the Bible for us? But I think you really have to dig for that compassion sometimes when your children are being unruly, or are being selfish, or fighting, or complaining, not eating the food that you cook them, or not wanting to share their toy, or someone touched their sock. Those different things can just, as a mom, after the 15th, 20th time, you're about to explode. And I feel that's the time when we need to dig into God to help us and give us the ability to have compassion and empathy and understanding, and just listening to them, not just outright disciplining them because of their behavior, but trying to listen to the story and the whole story and get each side, and then come to a conclusion after that. So loving our children, yes, we need to stop and pause sometimes. Be discreet, so self-controlled, being careful about where we are seen. I have this personal rule that I will never, I like to cook. I like to try new recipes, but a lot of those new recipes involve wine, and some of them involve beer. Those are ways that you can tenderize your meat and flavor your meat, but I will never ever buy wine in a grocery store, anywhere for that matter, because even though I have a small church, we've been in our community for almost 14 years. So there's a lot of people in our community who probably recognize me. My children have been in Head Start, so there is a little bit of an influence there. They've been in the public schools. There's a lot of people. And what if one of those people, they all know who I am. I'm a pastor's wife, and we speak out against alcohol. What if they saw me buying alcohol? Innocently, the reason would be something that I could defend, but they're not going to come to me. They're going to go back and talk around. You want to abstain from all appearance, and so alcohol is one of those things that you need to be very careful with, or be very discreet with. Chaste is another word for pure. Purity in your speech, purity in your dress, not having a tainted testimony out in the world, like I said, the alcohol thing. But that even goes to not just your outward appearance, but your inward thoughts. Nobody knows your inward, deeper thoughts, but the Lord knows those thoughts, and we need to be very careful, because usually a lot of times those thoughts can be expressed through our mouth, and sometimes if our thoughts are not in check, our speech will not be in check, so we have to be careful with that. Keepers at home. This is another topic that has become very unpopular in our world these days. People who stay at home with their children, homeschooling children, all of those things are very looked down upon, misunderstood. But God tells us differently. God tells us that we are our best teachers to our children, and we have to protect them, and we have to teach them what's right and what's wrong, and that is not what's going on in the schools these days. And if you're out working all the time, you're not able to teach them either. Your children are going to be raised by other people, so that may or may not have your same values, and so you really are responsible for being the teacher of your own children. Now, I understand that there are situations where moms have to work, so I am needing to be careful with this, but if there is any way that moms can stay home, we should want to be home, not wanting to be out working. So moving on. Being good. Okay, so being kind, being a desirable person with good qualities that people can look up to. Being agreeable, so somebody that can, you want your people to be able to approach you with concerns or struggles that they're having. You want to be a person that's not going to pass judgment right away, or someone that's going to be degrading. A lot of times we can come across that way and we don't even realize it. We just really need to be careful that we're coming across to our ladies and to other ladies in general, because not everyone's going to come to the pastor's wife. So you want to be a person that another lady can come to if they need advice or if they need encouragement. That kind of agreeable person. And at the same time, be a teachable person. So if somebody is loving you in such a way that they're coming to you in the right way and saying, hey, I noticed what happened back there and it really made me uncomfortable and I just wanted to see if everything's okay, because it wasn't right. You need to be a person that somebody can feel comfortable coming and doing that to you and not lash out at them. I think it's important that we're all teachable, because none of us have arrived. None of us have made it to the top and have nothing else to work on because we're so perfect. We need each other, not just for encouragement, but for edification. And we need to be teachable so that can work. And then lastly, obedient to husbands so that we can bring honor to the Word of God. So what this means would be to value his opinion, admire him for his wisdom, be respectful and notice him and regard him and honor him, appreciate him for who he is and don't judge him for who he isn't and who he can't be. Consider what his needs are. Consider that maybe the response that he is giving you at this point in time isn't because he's trying to be mean, but because he's stressed or because he's been hurt. So before we just lash out at our husbands, step back, take a breath like we do with our children, or we should do with our children, and ask ourselves, what's causing him to behave this way? And how can I help him rather than how can I criticize him? So that would be the Titus 2 passage. And then the other passage I'm not going to spend too much time on is Proverbs 31. And we all know this woman, and what an asset to her husband that she was, and what an asset to her community and to her children. She was virtuous. She was strong. She took care of her body. She ate well. And then she was selfless, never putting herself first, letting others go. And then rising early to take care of the things of the home. So those thoughts are what we as women in this room, all on the same page. We're all women, we're all moms, we're all, are we all married? We have single, okay.
She's only 16.
So we're looking, okay, great. So you look a little older than that. So great, so my teenage example will hit. Okay, good. But you are going to be looking for friends, you're going to be looking for potential husbands, so you want to be able to choose wisely. So it does apply to everybody. You still want to be a good example for people around you. So let's move along and then just kind of consider this from a pastor's wife's perspective and the thoughts and the expectations that we have on our pastor's wife, and I'm going to try to stress some important points that maybe you've never thought of. So first, consider her personality, especially if you're getting a brand new pastor's wife coming in to your church. Maybe your old pastor was there for 20 plus years. She's the only one that you've known, and now you have to get to know a new pastor's wife. So you get to need to know her and recognize her as a different personality and a different person. So she might be completely opposite of your other pastor's wife, but that doesn't make her any less of a pastor's wife than your former pastor's wife. So get to know her. Is she an introvert? Is she an extrovert? Is she somewhere in between? Does she talk too much? Sometimes we can because we're nervous. Sometimes we can't just because we like to hear ourselves talk. We're women. Okay? She is a woman just like you are. So don't think of her so highly and judge her so harshly and quickly. Get to know her first. So the next step you need to learn from her is what is her childhood history. And the only way you can learn this is by sitting down and talking with her and getting to know her. So you have pastors' wives that come in that they are not from Christian homes, that God saved them as an adult, maybe in college, maybe through radio ministry, and they are really new at this whole life of ministry, and now they're married to a pastor, which is something that they probably never expected in their wildest imaginations, and the life of a pastor's wife can be a very challenging one, especially if you're a new Christian. So, or is she from a Christian home? So you have to learn these things about her. Does she have a happy childhood? Or was she abused as a child? Does she have emotional baggage? I think we all have some kind of baggage in our life. If we've been alive long enough, all of us have some kind of baggage that, have caused anxiety or depression or had molded us into what we are. And so we really need to get to know what that is in her and help so that we can understand and empathize with her a little bit better. Lack of experience in the Christian ministry. So if she is just a newly saved Christian, she's not going to have any experience in the Christian ministry. And she's maybe going to need one of the older ladies in the church to mentor her. It's okay to be a pastor's wife and be mentored, especially if you're a young pastor's wife. It's okay. I had mentors, and I'm very grateful for them. And I didn't know. I didn't grow up in a pastor's family. Grew up in a Christian home, was not a very strong Christian home, but my mom did the best that she could with the knowledge that she had. So you need to understand that about your pastor's wife. And then another time of life. So is she a 20-something? Is she a 20-something that comes from a strong background, or is she a 20-something that comes from a weak background or no background at all? Get to know that about her. In the 30s, usually you're in the midst of raising your children. It can be a very trying time. She is not going to be as involved in ministry when she's in the midst of caring for her children, because her first priority is her husband and her children, and her last priority is the church. I think a lot of ladies don't want to acknowledge that, but her most important job is missionary to her children, and a good, strong woman will make that known. Then you have a pastor's wife in her 40s. This is me. Pastor's wife in your 40s, there's a whole lot going on in your 40s. You have perimenopause, and then you have menopause, and you have this whole change going on, and you have these emotions that they're making you a person that you never were. It's a confusing time of life. It's a depressing time of life. There's all these gamut of emotions going on, and at that point in time, we need to understand our pastor's wife more than ever and be compassionate with her and be understanding with her, and instead of accusing her or judging her silently, because most of the time I don't think anybody would come out right and say, "What is up with you?" I never would have done that in my pastor's wife. But you silently think, man, she's not a very good testimony at all. I think I'm just going to just talk to someone else. Now, we all, as I said earlier, we have to have self-control. But as you know, and if you've been through that time of life, it's really hard when those hormones are so rampant to find yourself. So have a little compassion and grace on your pastor's wife. I went through about 6 weeks ago, the worst PMS I have ever been through. All the emotions hit me that 1 week. And I was at the lowest point I've ever been. My children were misbehaving. My children were upset with me. My husband was trying his best. I had just things from my past, just everything was hitting me and overwhelming me, and I was struggling. So you're going to have those moments, and you need to understand your pastor's wife in order for those moments. And then a pastor's wife in her 50s. So by then, the children have grown up or are almost grown up. In my case, my children will still be trying to grow up, but either way, they're going to be a lot older than they are now. And so your opportunity for ministry opens up, and you can start ministering in more places and being more available, and just you're more of what a pastor's wife is expected to be. You're a mentor to other ladies because you've been through a lot of experiences. And also understand, as a pastor's wife, if she's 50s or above, or even 40s or above, she could be struggling with some illnesses, some silent illnesses that are just private for her and her family. You never know what's going on in someone's life, so we always need to treat people with grace. Excuse me. Consider her personal struggles. So I said earlier, her childbearing years, she's going to be, a lot of times overwhelmed with that. She could be struggling with infertility or miscarriages. I was not able to have children until 7 years after our marriage, and that wasn't because of infertility. That was just because of life circumstances. But I struggled with that, and people constantly asking me, when are you going to have a baby? That's just a really tough question. I would suggest never asking somebody that. It's a personal thing between a husband and a wife, and it could be a very, very tender subject if they're having a hard time starting a family. You could have a pastor's wife who has struggled with miscarriages. I've had 2. And I've always wanted 6 children. My children constantly remind me, but Mommy, you have 6 children. 2 of them are in heaven. And yes, that does help me. But you never forget those babies. You always wonder, especially around the time that they would have been born, you always wonder, what would they be doing right now? And if they'd be 5, they'd be 6. That's always going to be in your mind. And those times of year could be a challenging time for a woman when those memories come back. So have grace on her. Again, I talked about hormones. Rough childhood. I'm going to share a little bit about my childhood. I just want to get through my material first before I do it. An unsaved family. And then I wanted to open the floor to Andee, because she's, as a pastor's wife, is going to share what her past has been like.
Sure. I've been married to my husband for almost 22 years now, the end of this month. My husband is Pastor Tim Lewis from New England Shores Baptist Church. I did want to share just a fun little story about how Allison and I actually met. We were both brand new pastor's wives, and we had just moved to Hampton, where we're at now, and one of the families in her church in Kittery lived in Hampton. So we had met her, we knew they were in town, they were friends of friends, and she said, we're having a cookie exchange for our church ladies, why don't you come? That way you can meet some ladies from the area, you can meet Allison, I think that you would really enjoy one another's company. So I went, and it was a lot of fun, first time Allison and I had met. We had just announced that we were expecting our first child. So So we were kind of excited. We was like asking questions about that. Come to find out, Allison had just found out she was expecting her first child, but hadn't announced it yet, so she was kind of looking. But it was, I appreciate it. It was as a fun story, a fun connection for her and I, because we both were brand new pastors' wives together, first time moms together. Our sons are 7 weeks apart, so we kind of went through the pains of, first time motherhood and all of those things like that. So, but it was also very nice to have somebody, knowing that somebody was going through the exact same thing that I was going through at that time. I really enjoyed it. So we also have daughters that are very close in age together too, so they're very good friends. I've enjoyed having that fellowship. Even though we don't get together as much as we always say that we need to, it is appreciated to have that. Sometimes pastors' wives have things that they cannot talk to other people in their congregation, even their own family members, because it's just not stuff that we can talk about. But we can always, I appreciate that we can kind of, I call it commiserate together. Even though we may not share specifics, we don't share gossip about each other's churches. We don't name names. We just say, this is a struggle for me. And yes, this is also a struggle for me. So I appreciate it. I just wanted to share that little story about the two of us and how we met and how much I appreciate her friendship. I also wanted to share my salvation testimony with you because I think it's very important that you know our backgrounds. And my childhood, my upbringing is very different than Allison's is. But I love that about this session, that you get to learn that every pastor's wife has her story, right? She has a story about how she was saved, how she was reared, the things that went on in her life that prepared her for her ministry. And I love what Allison says, we're not, there's not a club, okay? There's not a pastor's wife's club that there's this exclusive, you have to be this way in order to be a pastor's wife. Although I do find it funny that it felt like sometimes when I was going through Bible school that there was a checklist for pastors' wives. They had to sing alto, and they had to play the piano, and they had to be good with kids. And for some reason I did check all those boxes, but that did not make me an automatic good pastor's wife. I just want to say that right now. I was saved when I was a child. I was about 6 years old. A little bit of my family background. My mom was saved when she was in high school. While she was at a Southern Baptist boarding school in Texas, of all places. So that's where she was saved. My dad grew up Southern Baptist. You always went to church. Everybody was saved, right, in the South. But he never personally accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior. My parents met in college. They got married. They had me. And when I was about 4 or 5, we moved from Kansas to Montana. They knew that's where they wanted to raise their kids. It was a good place. That's what they wanted to do. But my mom said, I need to be in church, and I need to have my kids in church. I think my sister was born at that time too. My dad was like, yeah, whatever, just find a church. I don't really care. I might go, one of those types of things. So we started going to this church, and I think my dad had gone to visit. And as every good Baptist pastor does, you always go and visit the first-time visitors, right? Well, we lived about 20 miles from town, up 5 miles on the dirt road, and the pastor had come to visit my dad because he visited the church, and that's when my dad accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior. And it was around the same time that I did too. I was in a Sunday school class, and the teacher asked, do you know that you would go to heaven right now if you were to? And I said, I do not know that. So she took me to a side room and led me through the plan of salvation. I'm thankful for that time that God saved me at that time. Sorry, I'm really emotional today. So I did grow up in a Christian home. My parents were very involved in church. My mom did the bulletin, and she taught Sunday school, and we did VBS, and we did all the things. And I am thankful for that time, even though that church is not necessarily a church that I would recommend going to now. I learned a lot, even through maybe not some of the best church things. I learned even now what I believe because of that church that we grew up in. I'm thankful that God prepared me, even for ministry now, through those things. But did that make me automatically a fantastic pastor's wife as soon as I married, Tim Lewis, and we started New England Shores Baptist Church? Absolutely not. God did use those things in my life to prepare me, but it was still not like an automatic, magic wand, oh, you're married to a pastor, therefore you are spiritually mature, and you'll never have any struggles, and this all will be very easy for you, right? Well, that was not me. I am an introvert. I call myself an extroverted introvert. or a forced introvert, more like. I remember when Tim was in seminary, and we were helping a church plant, and the pastor, we had a little coffee meeting with him, and he looked at me, and he said, "What is your biggest struggle?" And I said, "Talking to new people." I literally hate it. Like, I could hide in a corner underneath a chair and be perfectly happy as long as I don't have to talk to anybody that I don't know. And so he's like, yeah, you're going to have to get over that. Yeah, you're going to have to get over it. So when a new visitor, even to this day, brand new people, they walk in our door, I have to go, okay, let's go talk to the new people. It's not easy for me. And so I, even to this day, struggle with talking to people that I do not know. But I know that if I was a first-time visitor in a church that I knew no one, would I want nobody to talk to me? No, I wouldn't feel welcome. I wouldn't feel loved. And so I have to tell myself, how would I want to be greeted in a brand new church? I would want to feel loved. I would want to feel welcomed. So I have to say, this is my duty, not just as a pastor's wife, but as a member of New England Shores Baptist Church, to say, I need to make these visitors feel welcome. So that's kind of my background story, in that, I did grow up in a Christian home, and maybe, everybody would have looked at me growing up saying, she's going to be a pastor. That's just, I can tell that's what she's going to do. That did not make me automatically, comfortable being a pastor's wife. I was scared to death. Scared to death when I go, what if they ask me a question I don't know? Yeah. I have a funny story. Even this past Sunday, I was with the kids, and I love kids. But I don't feel like that's necessarily my gift, but I do it because that's what God wants me to do. I was playing Bible Guess Who with the kids, and I'm like, Lord, please don't let them ask me a question they don't know about the Bible. And when you know it, they did ask me a question. I'm like, let me Google that real quick.
Thank goodness for Google.
That's right. So that's my personal background story, which is going to be very different from Allison's. Yeah. But I'm thankful that God uses, and if you were in Lori's class too, you learned that, but God uses us, no matter what our background is. Yeah.
And it usually picks the average people. The ones who are not, terribly special in the world's view, and the ones who, there's the average people. And the ones who don't feel significant, he picks us. And I think that's a special gift too, because that's God's grace too. He could have exalted us if he wanted to, given us a name above all names, but he didn't. And I think that is part of the calling and part of the training for being a pastor's wife. So moving on. So her husband is always on call. Okay, pastor's wife husband is always on call, especially if he has no other pastors support pastors in the church. Always on call. So he carries a lot of burdens. He carries the burden of the whole church. He carries the financial burden. He carries the struggles. He carries the disappointments. He carries the complaints. All of it. It all strikes him right here. And he doesn't show that, but he comes home defeated a lot of times. When we need to remember that pastor's wife feels that as well, that burden. Sometimes he shares it with us, like Andee said, and sometimes he doesn't, and we need to be okay with that too. But those burdens become our burdens. Those hurts become our hurts. Those passions become our passions. So understand that a pastor's wife may not always be jolly, may not always be bubbly. She might be a personality that is melancholy and struggles with being joyful. It's okay to have a pastor's wife who struggles to be joyful. That's when you can come and pick her up and encourage her and help her get past that. It's okay for you as a member of the church and a fellow church lady to support and encourage your pastor's wife in her weakness. We do not need to put her on a pedestal so high that we cannot approach her because we feel like she is just too important. We are people, just like you are people with struggles, just like you are struggling. We need one another. And we need to remember that she is not something that should be held in a box and never taken out. You need to involve yourself with her. Okay, so her weaknesses, she could be an introvert, which can be a weakness because, as Andee said, and I will actually support that, it is really hard for me to go up to brand new people. But I do it as soon as I can because otherwise I'm going to talk myself out of it. And I'm going to go down to the nursery where I love to serve and just be, I didn't realize you've been here for 3 weeks and I never knew. It's that fear of meeting new people. So we have to go beyond that. And I was talking with another girl in my church, and she's like, oh, I never realized that you were like that. I always thought that you were just really good about going and meeting new people. And that's because I make a point. If I see them, I just do it because otherwise I'll talk myself out of it. She could be socially awkward. And I will input something about myself in this point. See, how many more pages do I have? Okay. Woo! We're losing time. Actually, I have 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to have to hurry. Through my son, I struggled academically growing up. We moved every 2 years, so that didn't help. We always moved in the middle of the year, so that doubly didn't help, especially when you're struggling academically. As an adult, I just struggled through. I pushed through. My mom helped me every night. It was torture. Helped me every night, but I got through school. And college, I was on my own. I got through college on my own. And got married and had my babies. And then I have a Jeremiah. My Jeremiah taught me that, yes, ADHD is real. Now, I think it's overdiagnosed, but I definitely know that ADHD is real, and I have researched it, and it is a neurological disorder. And the more I researched it, the more I realized I have those struggles as well. That's why I struggled through school, all of them, never knowing, because in our circles, ADHD was just, the parents' fault. It's not. In some cases, it is. It is not always the parents' fault. We struggle with Jeremiah. We still struggle with Jeremiah. But he has taught me so much about himself. He is now actually going through testing for dyslexia so that we can help him read because he is not reading yet, not like he should be. And so going through the steps of dyslexia, I'm like, that's what I have. I have dyslexia. And so a lot of this, it's dyslexia and ADHD overlap a lot in a lot of ways. And so a lot of those people are socially awkward. I'm socially awkward. That's why I have to force I do not like crowds. I do not like being with other people. I do not like crowds. I do not like going to parties, even if it's my own family's party. I don't like going to parties. I just don't like groups. I like one-on-one. I just feel very awkward in a group, and I don't know why, and I can't explain it, but I do. So low self-esteem and low confidence, this could be something else that she struggles with. Encourage her. She might be always worried that she's not doing enough. If a choice that she's made is not going to be well received, encourage her. She may not be a decorator or a planner. She might be extremely disorganized. Accept her for that. And if she's willing and you have an opportunity and the Lord presents that opportunity, don't go up to her and say, you got a problem with organization. Allow the opportunity to come. Notice that she's willing to learn. Step in. There's your role for helping her. She might not be comfortable teaching, but doing behind the scenes work. So for me, I would love to work in the kitchen, behind the scenes. I don't have to talk to anybody. I love working in the nursery, behind the scenes. I can talk to children. I don't have to talk to adults. Things like cleaning the church, anything like that. Behind the scenes, I don't have to talk to anybody. That's my struggle. She may not be a musician. There's a lot of pastors' wives I know that are not musicians. Don't hold that against her. She may not be a singer. There's a lot of pastors' wives who don't want her to sing, but don't hold that against her either. And she may not be a great speaker. She may be very timid. She may struggle with communication, struggle with friendships. So, okay, I have 3 minutes. I'm going to share a little bit about my background. Okay, so I struggled, very, very much so, obviously with ADHD and dyslexia, but I didn't know it at that time. I just thought I was stupid. My sisters all just flew through school, didn't have to work too hard at it. I did, and I still only got average grades. And in school, average grades were not good enough. That was the way that people thought about it. So I always felt so defeated. But home life was not good either. My mom did the best that she can in our situation, but my dad was not an easy guy. He was definitely a different person in public than he was at home. But that is not something we could talk about, because his reputation in public was so wonderful that if we even tried to talk to somebody about it because our struggle through it, we would be the ones that looked like the bad guys, the disrespecting children, this disrespecting wife. But home life was tense. It was scary. My daddy would have times when he just loved us to death and spoil us, and I just loved those times. But then something would happen, and we never knew what it was, because it happened like that. He would turn. He would get angry, he'd leave the house, and late at night he'd come back and he wouldn't speak to us for months. That can take a toll on your emotions and your confidence, and we didn't communicate about it. We couldn't talk to anybody because nobody would believe us. We couldn't even talk to his brothers and sisters because they would have never believed us. He wouldn't get diagnosed because, of course, he didn't think he had a problem. There is a diagnosis for it. As an adult, I have just stumbled upon a list of these mental illnesses, and this particular mental illness, and he fits it like a glove. And I'm like, oh. Okay, so there is something going on. It wasn't us. I would not be here today if it wasn't for my mom. My mom held us together. My daddy traveled 2 to 3 weeks out of the month, so those 2 to 3 weeks were a mess. And when he would leave, we would finally be able to decompress and relax and talk. But we could never talk to anybody else, ever. Now, as an adult, I've shared it with a few people as the opportunities came along, because people need somebody to relate to them. It's made me who I am today. My mom protected us. She defended us. She kept us safe. She was the glue that held us together. She kept us in church. We were in Christian school. I was in Christian school all of my life except for about 5 years. She did the best that she could. She worked so that we could be in school, Christian school. She just, I look back and I'm so thankful for her, because I don't know where I'd be today if it wasn't for her. I had Christian influences that, they wouldn't have believed our story at home if I had told them. But aside from that, they were good Christian influences. A good youth pastor. One wasn't the greatest, because he was, a lot like my dad, to find out. But the other one was wonderful, and I still keep in touch with him today. Pastor Kauffman. Wonderful. He had a gift. But I still wouldn't even talk to him about it. It's just a family secret. It was. It had to be, because no one believes. So it made me very anxious. We never learned how to communicate. with one another. So as a married woman, I struggle with communication. Instead of communicating, we would just hold it all in, and then we would stew. That's not the way you want to be. So I struggle with those as a pastor's wife. It's maybe who I am. I'm empathetic. I'm very perceptive. I sit back and I watch people and then determine, okay, are they safe? So if they're safe, great. If they're not, I keep my distance. I don't know if that's good or not, but for me it's the safe place. It's what I know. And so I have to work through it, and by God's grace I will work through it. But that's part of me. And so if nobody ever talked to me or got to know me, I've shared this with 2 people in my church, 2. And the opportunities were there, and I took them, and I'm thankful that I did, because now people understand me. They understand what makes me scared and what makes me tick, and I have my boundaries. I've learned, and as a pastor's wife, you do need to have boundaries. You do need to set those boundaries, and it's okay to set those boundaries. As an individual, it's okay to set those boundaries, but communication is key. Last but not least, a pastor's wife, loneliness is her friend. So understand that there's things that she cannot talk to you about. She has to be careful with friendships, because if you get too close to somebody, you could be accused of favoritism. But if you allow somebody to cling to you, it could be a bad thing at the same time. So there's just a balance there. That is helpful to you all. I hope that you go out of this room understanding your pastor's wife, or wanting to get to know your pastor's wife a little bit better.
Thank you.